Barbara Maliniks was born on May 29, 1950 in Munich, Germany. She spent her childhood in Germany, growing up in a family with slightly above-average income and not standing out in any particular way among her peers. At the age of 18, Barbara decided to get married, as she had always dreamed of having a family. However, the relationship was not ideal from the very beginning. The girl's fiery and audacious character did not match her husband's idea of the perfect wife. Constant quarrels led to a divorce a few years later. After that, Barbara decided to change her life and move to the USA. In total, Barbara had 3 marriages, and all of them ended in divorce. From her previous relationships, she had 2 sons who, at the time of the events described, were already living separately. Only her 17-year-old daughter Rachel, born in her marriage to her 3rd husband Bruce Maliniks, remained living with her mother. Bruce was 9 years younger than Barbara. Initially, the family lived in Oakland, Oklahoma, USA. Bruce was attracted to Barbara's vibrant personality, but over time these traits began to irritate him. The situation repeated itself, as in previous relationships, which eventually led to divorce. Rachel was born in 1989 and became a real princess for Barbara. According to the woman herself, she had always dreamed of having a daughter, so the girl was surrounded by care and attention from childhood. Rachel had the largest bedroom, was bought the best clothes, and had lavish birthday parties thrown for her. In her teens, she convinced her parents to transfer her to a private school with a flexible class schedule only once a week. Thus, the girl was not overstrained by studying, and her parents indulged her whims. Rachel led a carefree life, studied well, was engaged in sports, and participated in basketball competitions between schools. She also attended ballet and gymnastics classes. However, the relationship between her parents was strained. Barbara had problems with alcohol, which she had struggled with for a long time. After Rachel turned 10, the situation worsened. The girl recalled that her mother turned into a real drunkard who verbally and physically abused her husband and daughter at every opportunity. She was not shy about swearing and could grab them by the hair or hit them. Several times, the police had to be called because of domestic violence. This first happened in 2002. The police arrived on a call and found 12-year-old Rachel on the street. The girl showed bite marks that her mother had allegedly left. The report noted several wounds on the girl's back that she definitely could not have inflicted on herself. However, Rachel later confessed that she had made up this story and asked not to press charges against her mother. Most likely, she simply did not want Barbara to get in trouble. After such outbursts of aggression, the woman usually apologized to her family for a long time. When Barbara was not drinking, she was a caring mother. Even her ex-husbands described her as a kind and sociable person. But as soon as she touched alcohol, everything changed. All of Barbara's marriages fell apart for the same reasons, because of her drunkenness or because of aggressive behavior due to her difficult character. When Rachel turned 13, her father Bruce got tired of his wife's antics and decided to end the relationship. The man went to Newport Beach, California, to look for work. Barbara chose Tampa, Florida as her new place of residence. A difficult divorce process began, but both did not want to drag it out. To avoid unnecessary disputes, the parents suggested that their daughter choose for herself who she wanted to stay with. For a teenager, this was a real test. After the move, the parents would be in different states, so Rachel would have to make a lot of effort to see the one who would live separately. The choice was not easy, but in the end, the girl decided to move with her mother to Tampa. Her father was to pay alimony. This decision shocked Rachel's friends who knew about Barbara's alcohol problems and her lack of restraint. Even then, many predicted that this story would end badly. Unfortunately, the fears turned out to be not unfounded. The first incidents happened very soon. In 2004, the Tampa police received a call from the house where Barbara and Rachel lived. When the patrol officers arrived, they saw a woman in tears, nervous and trembling. There were injuries on her body, some of which she definitely could not have inflicted on herself. The woman was reluctant to communicate, answering monosyllabically, but from her words it became clear that these injuries were the work of her daughter Rachel. At the time of the police's arrival, the girl had fled the house. One of the officers called her on her cell phone. Rachel immediately answered and admitted that she had quarreled with her mother. Before leaving, they had fought. After that, the girl hung up and no longer answered the calls. As a result, a report was simply drawn up. Barbara refused to press charges against her daughter, so the case was closed. Previous incidents provoked by the mother in a state of alcoholic intoxication ended in a similar way. During that period, Barbara continued to abuse alcohol, and the situation seemed to only get worse. The woman did not work. She and her daughter lived on aid and alimony from Rachel's father, but this money was clearly not enough. By 2005, all of this led to Barbara being unable to pay the rent, and they were evicted. When they were informed about this and given a day to pack, Rachel called her father Bruce in Newport Beach and asked him to shelter her and her mother for a while, until Barbara recovered from her latest binge and got back on her feet. Bruce doubted that renewing a relationship with his ex-wife was a good idea, but there was no other way out. Rachel skillfully convinced him, saying that if he could not shelter them both, they would be forced to look for other housing and would not come to him. Apparently, Bruce really wanted his daughter to come, so he agreed to these conditions. Rachel herself later admitted that she understood that without her, her mother would finally slide into a marginal life and would no longer be able to get out. The girl hoped that in this way she would be able to save Barbara. Initially, Barbara was well aware that her ex-husband would be against her moving in, so she was very grateful to her daughter for her help. Having received permission from Bruce, mother and daughter packed their things and went to California. Newport Beach remains to this day one of the wealthiest and most prosperous cities in the United States of America. It is located south of Los Angeles and is famous for its beaches and luxury real estate. Bruce had his own apartment here. Usually in such areas, the crime rate is low, and the vast majority of offenses are related to burglaries. Violent assaults are extremely rare. Apparently, criminal elements are simply looking for profit. Unfortunately, with Barbara's arrival, the atmosphere in the house clearly became tense, which greatly upset Bruce. Despite the fact that the ex-spouses lived in separate rooms, they almost immediately began to quarrel. For Rachel, this move was a great opportunity to get acquainted with the secular life of an elite area of America. In any case, she and her mother focused on work, dreaming of achieving success in cinema and becoming famous. Barbara even took the first steps towards her dream. She got a job as an assistant on a film set, actively attended auditions and made new acquaintances. Everything was going on as usual until May 2006, when 17-year-old Rachel met a young man at a party. It was 21-year-old Ian Allen, who was described as a quiet surfer from the country, an athletic guy from a good family, good-natured and hardworking. At that time, he worked full-time, provided for himself, and was focused on his career and starting a family. Romantic feelings immediately arose between the young people, and soon Rachel introduced Ian to her family. At first, the 4-year age difference greatly alarmed Barbara and Bruce, but upon getting to know him better, they saw that their daughter had chosen a worthy guy. Bruce treated him well and hoped that Rachel would settle down with this decent young man. However, Barbara quickly began to have fits of jealousy. It seemed as if she was offended by Ian because he was taking up all of Rachel's free time, and now the girl was paying almost no attention to her mother. In addition, a big blow for Barbara was the change in her daughter's priorities. Rachel focused on her relationship with her boyfriend and pushed her Hollywood dreams into the background. Before that, she and her mother had a common goal, to become actresses and achieve success in cinema. This seemed especially appropriate here in California. Now it became obvious that the girl had lost interest in work, and her hormones had completely clouded her mind. Barbara continued to move towards her dream. She even managed to get a small role in the TV series, CSI, Crime Scene Investigation, where she appeared in one of the episodes as a minor character. Now the woman was waiting for new roles and was afraid that her family dreams of popularity would go to ashes. Given the age difference between the lovers, Rachel demanded official permission from her parents that they did not mind her relationship with Ian. However, she was good at manipulating her mother and father and giving them ultimatums. Probably, this is how the girl forced them to sign this document. From that moment on, the couple could date calmly. The high school girl always had this permission with her so that her boyfriend would not have any problems. The paper completely protected him from any accusations of corrupting a minor, which he was subject to. According to the law, Rachel managed to get very favorable conditions for herself in this agreement. The only restriction was the curfew set at 1 o'clock in the morning. But, as practice has shown, even this turned out to be too serious a restriction for a rebellious teenager. On August 31, 2006, Rachel accidentally fell asleep at her boyfriend's house and missed her curfew. Barbara was furious. She could not get through to her daughter, so she went to Ian's house at the beginning of the second hour of the night. There, the woman began to knock on the door of the guy's family, threw a real tantrum, shouted and woke everyone up. She dragged Rachel out of the house by force and forbade her to see Ian. This came as a shock to the lovers, but for a while the couple decided to obey. 10 days after this conflict, an entry appeared in the girl's diary that her relationship with her mother had deteriorated to an all-time low. She openly called Barbara a psychopath and wrote that she heard threats against her every day. Rachel regretted that she had not left her mother then in Tampa and had not gone to her father alone. Now the girl hoped that Barbara would calm down and everything would be as before, but it did not get better. On September 13, 2006, a yacht sailed into Newport Harbor. Almost immediately, the captain noticed something suspicious in the water and became interested. At first it was tightly sealed, and the yachtsman even thought it looked like a coffin. But he dismissed these gloomy thoughts. When the man retrieved the suspicious object, it indeed turned out to be the body of a woman, wrapped in a bloody sheet. He immediately reported this horrific find to the Coast Guard. When police officers arrived at the scene, they counted 52 stab wounds on the victim's body, inflicted on the face, neck, upper body and back. The most alarming was the knife sticking out of the eye. Along with the body, another bloody knife of a smaller size was wrapped in the same sheet, on which there were even particles of the victim's skin. A third knife was simply lying in the box. All of them were ordinary kitchen utensils from the same set. The body was sent for an autopsy. The forensic expert found that out of the dozens of stab wounds, 2 were fatal. They had cut the jugular vein and carotid artery. Each of these injuries would have killed the victim within minutes, and without immediate medical attention, the chances of survival were 0. According to the expert's conclusion, the murder occurred on the evening of September 12, less than a day before the yacht owner's call. But the victim could not be identified until the forensic expert discovered breast implants. Each of them was assigned a serial number at the factory, thanks to which they could be used similarly to dental records. This is how the police found out that the deceased was Barbara Maliniks. Checking the implant numbers also made it possible to find out the victim's address. Detectives went to the house where she lived with her daughter and ex-husband. When investigators arrived at the family's residence, there was no one in the house. They began to inspect the area. Soon Bruce drove up to the house. The man said that he had been on a business trip 2 hours drive from home for several days and had returned less than an hour ago. According to him, he did not find his daughter or ex-wife at home. Upon returning, Bruce went to the store for groceries and had not yet had time to call them. He confirmed that the cell phones of both were silent, which seemed strange to him, but he did not attach much importance to this, assuming that they were all busy with their own affairs and would return later. In a conversation with detectives, Bruce said that his relationship with Barbara was not easy. Despite the divorce, they lived together again at the request of their daughter. The atmosphere in the house was quite tense, including because of Rachel's teenage years and her relationship with a guy, which worried her parents. Bruce admitted that the main reason for the divorce was his wife's alcohol addiction and her violent behavior when drunk. In addition, he reported that Barbara periodically used illegal substances, which only worsened her inadequate actions. The man immediately got on the list of the main suspects, because he could have had a motive. Barbara herself could easily have provoked the circumstances for an attack. The large number of wounds inflicted indicated a premeditated murder with particular cruelty. The perpetrator clearly felt hatred for his victim. With a high probability, the killer had to be sought among the closest circle of the deceased. Investigators immediately noticed that Bruce was not too upset by the news of Barbara's death. He was either skillfully hiding his true feelings, or indeed felt more sympathy for her problems than anything negative. The man cooperated with the investigation and allowed the apartment to be inspected. During a search of the victim's bedroom, a small imprint was found on the wall, similar to a smeared trace of a bloody hand. In the kitchen bucket, a sponge was found with suspicious dark stains and a latex glove. Obviously, someone had selectively cleaned up the hallway. On the table was a set of knives, which were missing several items. Outwardly, they were identical to those found in the box with the victim's body. Given all these facts, suspicions about Bruce increased. Police detained the man and took him to the station for questioning. However, he immediately provided an alibi that was easily verified. Bruce really was out of town, several hundred kilometers from the crime scene. This was confirmed by records from the motel and the testimony of colleagues. At the time of the murder, he was working with a regular client. The deceased's ex-husband was released after being questioned in detail about the circumstances of the last months of Barbara's life. Despite her quarrelsome character, Bruce did not know anyone who could become her mortal enemy, capable of such a brutal murder. Considering that the family lived together and Rachel had disappeared, the police now wanted to talk to the daughter. When inspecting the family's home, no signs of a break-in were found. Despite this, there were serious fears that Rachel, who had disappeared from all radar, could be in danger. It was impossible to contact the girl, she ignored calls from relatives and the police. There were also no ransom demands. According to the neighbors, the last activity in the apartment was noticed a few days ago. Then the house was empty until the arrival of Bruce and the police. Detectives learned about Rachel's relationship with an older boyfriend. In addition, Bruce told about the problems that arose between Barbara and the young couple, in particular about the latest incident, when the woman took her daughter from the guy's house and forbade her to meet with Ian Allen. Thus, the lovers could have wanted to take revenge on Barbara, who was interfering with their relationship. The police went to Ian's house to talk to him and find out where Rachel was. Suspicions about the couple began to be confirmed. Ian had also disappeared. His parents reported that they last saw their son a few days ago. Since then, they have not been able to get through to him. Relatives were very worried and were already going to go to the police themselves to report the disappearance. They were caught in a car in the driveway, just as they were about to go to the station. Ian's parents allowed the police to inspect the guy's room. Law enforcement officers immediately took his laptop for forensic examination. As it turned out, shortly before his disappearance, Ian had planned a route to Tampa, Florida. His car was not near the house, so the car was immediately put on the wanted list, also distributing a description of the appearance of the young man and his girlfriend Rachel. It seemed that the couple was involved in the crime and was now on the run. The authorities began tracking the activity of the young people's bank cards. In less than a day, a payment at a gas station in Louisiana was recorded. Already on September 15, 2006, one of the officers noticed Ian's car on the road. It was stopped, and the guy surrendered without resistance. Interestingly, as soon as the car was stopped, Rachel ran out of the car and ran to the officers, claiming that she had been kidnapped and was being held against her will. Although it sounded implausible, the girl was not arrested, but was taken to the hospital. Ian was taken to the police station. Medics confirmed that Rachel had no signs of abuse or forcible detention. It seemed that she was in the car voluntarily, without any coercion. In addition, during a second conversation with law enforcement officers, suspicious flaws and contradictions were noticed in her story. After a medical examination, the girl was also arrested and taken to the station. According to Rachel, on the night of September 13, 2006, she woke up from her mother's screams. The girl ran out of bed and ran to Barbara's bedroom, where she saw her boyfriend stabbing the woman to death. As soon as he noticed Rachel, he punched her in the face. The girl fell and lost consciousness. She came to her senses already in a hotel room, where Ian had brought her. The guy kept Rachel there for several days, and then they began to move towards the state border in order to escape. The girl insisted that she had been kidnapped, but the police quickly found evidence that she was lying. At least, there were no traces of a fist blow on her face, which she had talked about. But Rachel's DNA samples were found on latex gloves, a sponge that was found in a box with the body, in Barbara's bedroom, and even on the tape that sealed the box with the corpse. The girl at least helped to hide traces of the crime. The criminals carefully cleaned the knives, so no fingerprints were left on the handles. Because of this, it was possible to restore the sequence of events only from the words of the killer or killers. When checking the correspondence of the young people, it was possible to find out that Rachel had been telling her boyfriend for a long time that her mother was going to kill her, that she heard threats against her every day and was simply afraid for her life. The girl's messages sent on the night of the murder turned out to be especially important. She wrote to Ian that there was another conflict with her mother and it was time to put an end to it. What exactly she meant remained a mystery. Rachel herself insisted that they were discussing running away to another state. However, the context seemed much gloomier. The police reviewed the CCTV footage at the gas station visited by the runaway couple before their arrest. The footage showed Rachel walking calmly next to the guy. She was clearly not being held captive and showed no signs of fear. Detectives decided to talk to Ian again, who had so far denied all charges. Finally, the guy started talking and confessed to committing a brutal crime. According to him, Barbara greatly interfered with his relationship with Rachel. There was even a threat that the woman would accuse him of corrupting a minor. Ian was afraid of losing his job, his girlfriend, his freedom. The crazy alcoholic could ruin his life, and he could not allow that. So the young lovers decided that the only way to solve the problem was to kill Barbara. They planned everything together. Rachel was supposed to watch and choose the perfect moment when her mother would be most vulnerable. Thanks to the girl, Ian found out that Bruce was going on a business trip. At night, the guy broke into the house, the doors of which Rachel left unlocked. When Barbara fell asleep, the young man took several knives from the kitchen and then attacked the woman in the bedroom. The first blow hit the eye. The young man thought that it would instantly kill the victim, but he was wrong. He could not pull the knife out of the eye socket, and Barbara, instead of dying, screamed loudly and began to resist. The guy began to strike blow after blow with another knife, because he was frightened and just wanted to make the woman shut up as soon as possible. Ian took all the blame on himself, stating that Rachel only watched the process, and then helped to clean the room and get rid of the body. The story seemed quite convincing, but there was one flaw in it. The guy mentioned only 2 knives, although the police found 3. Investigators believed that the victim's daughter also took an active part in the reprisal and used the 3rd knife. After the murder, the couple wrapped the body, along with the instruments of the crime, in a sheet, hid it in a large TV box, and took it out of the house, and then threw it into the water. Bruce Maliniks' neighbor confirmed that on that fateful night, he heard loud sounds from the Maliniks' apartment. He saw 2 young people, a guy and a girl, carrying a large box at midnight. This seemed strange to him, especially given that half an hour before that, he had heard a woman's screams. Now it became clear that in this way they got rid of the body, trying to attract as little attention as possible. Having thrown away Barbara's remains, the young people returned home. Rachel cleaned up the blood in her mother's bedroom, while her boyfriend took the mattress and other items to burn them away from the crime scene. At the same time, the girl wrote love messages to Ian, clearly not upset by her mother's death. Investigators were convinced that Rachel actively participated in the crime, because her behavior was too calm. She did not even try to call for help, but on the contrary, urged the guy to finish what he started. This contradicted Ian's words, who described Rachel during the murder as petrified with horror and not involved in the reprisal. In addition, a neighbor said that he saw the young man carrying a large number of black garbage bags out of the house after they had already got rid of the box. The guy confessed that he went with these bags to work and asked his boss for permission to use the company's dumpster. Thanks to this, the bags were found. Inside, personal belongings of the murdered woman were found, which the couple wanted to get rid of. On June 7, 2008, the trial of Rachel began. By that time, her version of events had changed several times. Now the accused admitted that she had lied about the kidnapping, she had gone with the guy voluntarily. At the trial, she adhered to a version more similar to Ian's words. Rachel claimed that she was frightened and became an accomplice not of her own free will, but out of fear. However, it looked more like an attempt to stick to a common legend, from which she had deviated at first. The girl continued to insist that she did not participate in the murder, but only out of fear cleaned up the traces of the crime and helped get rid of the body by packing it in a box. The lawyer failed to convince the court of her non-involvement. The jury found Rachel guilty of killing her mother and sentenced her to 25 years in prison. 2 months later, the trial of Ian Allen took place. When the young man found out that Rachel was putting all the blame on him and had made up a story about the kidnapping, he stopped protecting her. In a fit of anger, Ian said that the girl had been the ideological mastermind of the crime from the very beginning. But now it was too late. The prosecution convincingly proved that he had cold-bloodedly stabbed a defenseless woman in a fit of hatred. Ian was also found guilty and sentenced to the same punishment, 25 years in prison. Despite the guy's words, even now many people support Rachel and consider her innocent. In particular, her brother, grandmother and grandfather are convinced that she became a victim of circumstances. On October 14, 2022, Rachel was released early from prison for good behavior. She went to her father in Newport Beach, California, where she still lives. Ian Allen is still serving his sentence in the state prison. He does not maintain contact with Rachel, their relationship was interrupted in the early stages of imprisonment. Please write your thoughts and reactions in the comments below. For those who are new here, subscribing is the best way to stay updated on future content. Also give a like please. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. Thank you for your support during this difficult time. Until next time, friends.